Welcome back to the Hard Skills Show, where we take a deep dive into the most challenging soft skills required to navigate leadership uncertainty, complexities, and change today and into the future. I'm your host, Dr. Mira Brancu, psychologist, leadership consultant, and founder of TowerScope. Today's episode is really relevant to what seems to contribute most to human conflict we see in the world today: poor listening skills. Oscar Trimboli is here with us today to help us become better listeners. And it's also a really great topic for season 7's focus on navigating unhealthy work environments. And that's also in honor of my new workbook, Millennials Workbook for Navigating Workplace Politics. To get a light taste of the book's content, I do have some free downloadables, including 4 models of giving feedback and feedback readiness checklists, and some tip sheets beyond that book content, including one for communicating during times of uncertainty, which you might find especially useful right now. All of these are available on my website at gotowerscope.com under resources and under other free stuff within resources. Now, today, we're going to get a deep dive into developing exceptional listening skills. So whether you're a leader managing a team or simply trying to support your colleagues, this conversation is for you. Let me introduce to you our guest, Oscar Trimboli. Oscar is an award-winning author, host of the Apple award-winning podcast, Deep Listening, and a keynote speaker. His third book is How to Listen, and I happen to have it here today with me. It's a really, really deep dive. How to Listen, Discover the Hidden Key to Better Communication is the full title. An incredibly comprehensive book about listening in the workplace. Along with the Deep Listening Ambassador community, he is on a quest to create 100 million deep listeners in the workplace. Welcome and great to have you on the show, Oscar.
G'day, Mira, and really looking forward to listening to your questions today.
Absolutely, yes. Listening to my questions. Did you hear what he said? Okay, so Oscar, first obvious question, how did you get interested in this topic?
I think the topic found me. I was sitting in a boardroom in 2008 and 3 countries in a video conference setting a budget. I was a marketing director at Microsoft. And 20 minutes into the meeting, my vice president, my boss, my supervisor, looks me straight in the eye across the table and says, "Oscar, we need to talk immediately after this meeting." And I think to myself, this is like the honey we need to talk conversation. I better figure out how many weeks of salary I got left and who I need to call because I reckon I'm going to get fired. Ironically, I didn't listen to the rest of the meeting. The meeting finished up, everybody packed up and started to leave, and I tried to get out. And Tracy said to me, "Hey, Oscar, close the door. What I have to say is really important." And as I walked back towards the boardroom table, she says, "You have no idea what you did at the 20-minute mark." And I thought, great, I'm getting fired. I don't even know why. I sat down. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "Oscar, if you could code how you listen, you could change the world." What I heard was, "Woohoo! I haven't been fired." So the difference between hearing and listening is action. And I hope I've honored Tracy's request since 2008 to code not how I listen, but how the world's best listeners listen, whether that's in jigsaw puzzle games or 3 books or an online assessment, workshops. And yeah, we've got great research from 35,000 people about what kind of gets in their way when it comes to listening. So I want to acknowledge
Yeah.
Tracy.
Thanks, Tracy, for the feedback. Well, let's start with that. You mentioned that you have gathered all of this information on barriers, right? What are the biggest listening barriers?
When it comes to listening in the workplace, our research tells us there's 4 primary ways that people create self-limiting filters when it comes to listening, because our listening, although we're never taught it formally, we're taught it informally through role modeling, through our parents, through our teachers, through our peers, through our aunties, our uncles, our grandparents. And we adopt one of these barriers. One of these 4 barriers comes up for everybody. So I want you to think of the worst listener you know and see which one of these four categories the worst listener you know fits into. So
All right.
the obvious one is the interrupting listener. They're the quiz show contestant that presses the buzzer, gets in early but answers the wrong question. And the
Mm,
speaker says, they're not interested in me, they're not interested in their problem, they're just interested in themselves. The next one is the problem solver, the shrewd listener. They're jumping ahead, they're solving the problem. What the speaker says is, they're not listening to me, they're trying to fix me. So that's shrewd, a second
mhm.
listener that gets in the way. Number three is lost. People who come across as vague, disinterested, not participating, not sure why they're there. And they're just not clear on their purpose in the conversation. And
Mm,
from the speaker's perspective, they come across as why they even present in the conversation. And then the final one, we call it the dramatic listening villain. They love moving the spotlight off the story that the speaker is telling onto them. Speaker might say, I'm really struggling with my manager. And they'll jump in and go, oh, let me tell you about a time I really struggled with a manager. And all of a sudden, the conversation moves to them. So those four villains are interrupting, shrewd, lost, and dramatic. Now, Mira, did you have someone? Don't name them. Did you have someone who fitted in
yes.
one of those boxes? Which box did they fit in?
Yes, yes. The dramatic listening villain.
Mm,
Yeah. And it always feels like very frustrating that I haven't been listened to, right? And that they always make it about them. They always
mm.
find a way to make the story about them. And,
Okay.
the other thing, though, that I was thinking about when you were describing these is how fascinating it is that when we think about who we label as having leadership material,
Mm,
right? Being leadership material, having leadership qualities, they do interrupt, they do take up the limelight, they do seem to jump in trying to problem solve and fix things. And sometimes they speak in generalities and heads in the cloud and, visionary, but never like specific. And I find that really interesting that the very people we sometimes label as having leadership qualities, in fact, are terrible listeners. I'm
mm.
wondering, like, what just what you think about that, what your reaction is.
Yeah, just a quick commercial break from labels. I think labels are really good on food and pharmaceutical products and human behavior, but not on people. So let's be careful how we use the phrase labels in our workplace. We're not labeling a person, we're labeling their behaviors. And I love the way you made that distinction. So thank you. I think for many people who are leaders, they'll make excuses about why, I'm time poor, I'm in back-to-back meetings, therefore I need to interrupt. Okay, that's okay, but there's a consequence for that. You reduce trust. You reduce the number of people who are going to speak up. Are you conscious of that? And I think for all of us, if we're truly self-aware, we probably saw a bit of all of those villains in ourselves. And how we listen at work and how we listen at home may be a little different. So for me at work, I'm a shrewd listener. I'm trying to problem solve. Yet at home, I'm lost. Particularly when my brothers are talking about religion all the time. They're talking about the religion of Canon versus Nikon cameras, right? They write into their cameras, and my camera is my phone, and I occasionally use it. So we want to be getting our listening right before we're judging other people's listening is the point I would make about leaders. Consequences for leaders who don't listen. Staff leave early. Like, I don't need to hang around. I can get a better offer somewhere else. Customers go and join the competition, or projects take longer to complete. Your business isn't as profitable as it could be. So for leaders out there, the more senior you are, the more consequential your listening is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate that you mentioned, um, recognizing where our own liabilities are. We all have these liabilities, right? And in certain circumstances where our liabilities are different. So I appreciated how you described, like, at work, my liability is problem solving, which is definitely mine as well. Mine continues into the home the same way. But for other people, it changes, right?
Yeah.
And I think that um, if we're going to change the work environment to produce better listeners, we have to start with ourselves first, always, and recognize kind of where we're trying to work on ourselves and the ways that we don't listen.
Yeah, and I think in those barriers that we describe in our fundamental research is also the keys to the strengths. So think about interrupting. What they're about is about productivity and time. So
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
if they're conscious that their interruption is actually costing them time and they'll get that
mm,
time back with more contribution, the interrupting listener just adjusts ever so slightly. All they have to do is count 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, and they'll be surprised what they hear. Now, I worked with a leader at West Point, not too far from where you are, and they said the 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000 thing didn't work, so they literally bit their tongue, and that stopped them. And they said, "Wow, I so many more people are contributing now." So if you're conscious of time and you are that interrupted, just think about there's a strength in time and productivity. For the problem solver, the goal is solve the problem that needs to be solved, not the problem you're anticipating. So often people will be prescribing a solution to a problem that the person didn't actually describe because you're stuck in your own head. So for the shrewd listening villain, you're an amazing problem solver. Listen to how they're saying it, not just what they say. Notice if they're talking about a problem or the future and a solution, as an example. Or notice if they're talking about it individually or collectively, because you'll solve differently as a result. For lost, you just want to be clear on purpose. So if you're invited to a meeting and you're not sure why you've been invited, just take a little bit of responsibility and just say, hey, what purpose would you like me to play in this meeting? And if you're at the meeting and you haven't done that, simply ask, how would you like me to listen through this meeting? Would you like me to listen as a customer, another department? If you're not clear, so then the host can describe the relationship there. And then for our dramatic listeners who are trying to create connection, so they're saying, if I tell a story like their story, we'll be connected. You'll create much more connection if you let them finish their story and then decide whether your story is relevant to the purpose of the conversation. So for every liability, there's an asset. And I don't want us all to feel helpless and hopeless about listening. There's a whole bunch of tips in there that, which one of those might be useful for you, Mira?
yeah, I mean, I love, first of all, I just in general love the idea of um recognizing what the need is behind the behavior,
Mm,
right? If you can recognize what is it that I need, or what is it that someone else needs here, and what can we offer to help them still get that need to be met in a different way that doesn't sort of invalidate or take away from the other person. And I really, I like that. I equate it to the way that we think about leadership assessment, but kind of flip. When we think about leadership assessments, we often think, what are my strengths, and what are the associated shadow side or liabilities over utilizing that strength. And in
mm,
this case, you're sharing more. What is the challenge, and what is the need behind the challenge? Can we flip it to a strength that you can use to meet that need, right? So I
yeah.
really love that. We're reaching an ad break, so I'm going to take a pause. And after the ad break, I'd love to get into your five levels of listening, because I think they're really fantastic. You're listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest today, Oscar Trimboli. We air on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern. If you're watching right now, you can find us live streaming on LinkedIn and YouTube and several other locations at talkradio.nyc, and even leave us a comment or a question. And we'll be right back in just a moment.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Welcome back to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest today, Oscar Trimboli of How to Listen. See that? Oh, I'm having some trouble there. Okay. So Oscar, before we get to the 5 levels of listening, there is a statistic that you shared in your book that I found fascinating. The difference between thinking, speaking, and listening speed and how that affects our listening. I would love for you to share more with our audience about this.
Yeah, these 3 numbers, if you know them, you'll change your listening as a result. If you're conscious of these 3 numbers, you'll change the way you speak as well. And with these 3 numbers in mind, probably, to be honest, the only thing you need to listen to today, because when we share these numbers with other people, they go, wow, okay, now I understand why. So let's talk about the 3 numbers. The numbers are 125, 400, and 900. Now, listening is a simultaneous equation. That means that your role as a speaker changes to your role as a listener, even while you're speaking. And if you're listening, your role will change and you'll become a speaker at some point as well. So you need to know these numbers from both sides. So let's start with the speaker side. We speak in a range, but let's give it an average, 125 to 150 words per minute. Now, if I'm auctioning a property or calling a horse race or selling cows at a cattle yard, I can speak at 200 words per minute and you can still understand everything I say. But on average, we're going to speak 125 to 150 words per minute. Yet on average, I can think at 900 words per minute. That means the first thing I say is 14% of what I think. Let me say it a different way. If you just listen to the first thing that somebody says, you're missing out on 86% of what they think and what they mean. So if you want shorter meetings or less meetings, just take a little bit more time to notice and listen to what they haven't said rather than exclusively to what they have said. So those first 2 numbers, I speak at 125 words per minute, yet I can think at 900, means I can't get everything out of my mind the first time. So Mira, when you process those numbers, we'll get to 400 shortly. When you process those numbers originally, what happened for you?
Yeah, I mean, I had to slow down and really, I mean, think about it and the implications, you know, and it is a lot of what you learn as a psychologist, especially as a clinical psychologist, and, you know, is to um, ask a lot more questions to get at what's behind what was stated, right? So that's kind of what comes up for me.
Yeah. And a little caveat, listening in the workplace is not psychology or psychiatry. And if you're not licensed to practice, please don't try and pretend you're one of those in the workplace as well.
Right, right.
Sometimes your presence is more impactful in listening than your questions. So the first thing we need to become conscious of is, are we ready to listen? Because most of us turn up to a conversation with all our browser tabs open in our brain, taking up memory and processing stuff. And we're thinking about the last meeting, the next meeting, and how we're going to jump in and what point we want to make. And did I put the trash out? And all these things are going on in our mind, but we haven't taken the time to listen to ourselves. Now, we'll get to that shortly when we talk about the different levels of listening. But I do want to pause and spend some time with 400. So we can listen at maximum speed of 400 words per minute. Now, for some of you listening, you may be listening on a device that allows you to increase the speed of this conversation to 2 times speed, and you can completely comprehend everything that's going on. Here's the challenge. When you speak to a human live and they're speaking in a range of 125 to 150 words per minute and you can listen to 400, your mind goes, oh, wow, I wish they'd hurry up. Oh, okay. Well, while they're doing that, I'm just going to jump ahead to a meeting in 2 weeks' time and think about that. Oh, they mentioned the word yellow. Yellow relates to what I'm trying to do for a holiday plan I've got. And all of a sudden, you're drifting away, you're anticipating, you're judging, you're not actually listening. So you can listen much faster than they can speak. So start to notice not just what they are saying, notice how they are saying it as well. And we talk about see, sense, and sound. What do you hear? What do you see? What do you sense? Are you using your whole body to listen, or are you just using your ears? So for many of us, just knowing those 3 numbers will completely alter the way not only we listen, but also the way we speak. The hardest position in any conversation for listening is actually the speaker, not the listener. Because the speaker is trying to see if the information is making sense. Is it landing? So it's a tough job both to speak and to listen.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking about a client that I had recently who had been working to get another job. And not because he didn't love his current job. He actually did. He was very passionate about it, but he was pretty unhappy with the leadership. And it was making him so miserable, he just couldn't continue. So he had interviewed at lots of different places. He finally landed a position. They were thrilled. They were just like, when can you start? And we're so excited. And, you know, and so he's relaying this supposedly exciting situation where everybody's thrilled to have him and he's going to leave. And I just kept listening and his face just kept drooping lower and lower as he's describing. And it was such a flat affect, right? So now the content of his information didn't match his face at all. And so, you know, I sort of paused and I said, I'm wondering how you're feeling about this, because I'm not seeing excitement on your face in the way that you're talking about the, you know, the situation, what's happening. And it led into a completely different conversation. We talked about grief. We talked about forgiveness. We talked about meaning making. I mean, like deep, deep stuff. And that would have never happened had I not been paying attention to more than the content of his words.
Yeah. And if you're on your cell phone or your tablet or your laptop or noticing your connected watch at the same time, you would have missed all of that.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Okay. So now this is fascinating. I'm still taking it in. If we say 14% of what we're actually thinking, right? And if other people miss 86% of what we're thinking, how do we use the listening piece to bridge some of that gap? What are some ways to notice, to stop, to recognize, to start to bridge the gap?
I want to give you a compass to help the setting of the conversation. And with this compass, you'll have permission to interrupt skillfully and professionally. With this compass, you'll be able to shorten the conversation. With this compass, you'll help them, you, and everybody else in the conversation feel heard. And the compass is simply this question that you should ask at the commencement of the conversation or sometime just after the chit chat and the, how's the weather part of the conversation. Ideally, if you could ask this question before you meet, even better. What will make this a great conversation? What will make this a good conversation? What will make this a productive conversation? You can pick whatever adjective you want to put in front of conversation. Now, notice it's not what would make this a good conversation for you. We're actually not interested in what would make it a great conversation for you, because if there are two people in a meeting, there are three entities present: you, them, and the purpose of the meeting. This question is designed to understand the purpose of the conversation, not the agenda. That's what will make this a good conversation allows them to say, Mira, it would be a great conversation if by the end of this, we had made a decision. Or it would be a great conversation if we brainstormed a whole bunch of ideas. Or it would be a great conversation if we figured out how to bring this project to a conclusion quicker. Now, if they say that, they'll tell you what will make it a good conversation for them. Please make sure you tell them what will make it a good conversation from your perspective also. Your job as a listener is not to be a sponge. Your job is to create some energy and possibly think of a trampoline rather than a sponge, because a sponge can be draining, can be difficult, can be heavy. And a lot of people think that good listening in the workplace feels like somebody on a therapy couch. Couldn't be further from the truth. Now, with this question, what would make it a good conversation? Let's pretend we're meeting for an hour. At the 10 to 15 minute mark, you can simply say, Mira, you said this would make it a good conversation. How are we going? How are we tracking? Which gives you an opportunity, if they're telling this long rambling story and you can't kind of make sense of it, to interrupt. And you'll get 3 possible responses back from Mira. Yep, we're right on track. Now that we've spoken a bit, we probably need to be thinking about this as well. Or, yeah, now that I've thought about it, we probably don't need to cover off anything else. We can probably just spend the next 15 minutes and then we can wrap up. Now, you can use that compass setting all the way through. So in an hour meeting, every 10 to 15 minutes, you can check in. And that gives you permission to interrupt, but also to give you the opportunity to stay on track with your listening, because you can listen not just from what's going on in your mind about yellow means holiday, means planning. No, we also can listen for the purpose of the meeting as well, and that will keep you centered and present as we're going through. Now, the same thing works in team meetings as well, but we'll just stick to a one-on-one right now. How useful is that question for you, Mira?
It's great. I was thinking that it aligns very well with some coaching skills. You know, in coaching, you try to establish in the first 15 minutes or so, what is the goal? What is going to be the focus of our time together? What would make it feel most productive? How will we know it was a good, productive conversation, right? You know, that you met your goal. And if it feels like it's going off track, you check, like we said this, it seems like it's going in this direction. Do you want to keep with like this direction or this direction? And so it continues to sort of do that check-in. And I like just applying it to any conversation, not just the coaching conversation. Yeah. We are reaching another ad break. We didn't get to the 5 levels of listening, but I was listening so intently to all the other things Oscar was sharing with us that I wanted to pursue a couple of things. We'll be right back in just a moment. When we come back from the ad break, we will get to the 5 levels of listening. You're listening to me, Dr. Mira Brancu, on the hard skills with Oscar Trimboli, author of How to Listen, and we'll be right back.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Hi, I'm Linda Marsanico. The A Train to Sedona is a memoir about my journey to love and compassion. It's also the name of my new broadcast on Wednesdays at 12 noon. When we are spiritual, we embrace possibilities and ideas, which strengthen our mind, body, spirit, health, and wisdom. On the A Train to Sedona broadcast, I plan to interview guests who embrace these expansive practices. Join us on Wednesdays at 12 noon on Talk Radio New York City.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest today, Oscar Trimboli of How to Listen. And so in your book, you describe 5 levels of listening. And, it serves as a large portion of the book, helping us walk deeper and deeper and deeper into these levels. I would love for you to share what those levels are, and especially those last 3 that I don't think a lot of people get to.
Yeah, and we'll describe the evidence of why people don't get there. And again, I was working with a board of directors, and the chair said to me after the meeting, he said, Oscar, this workshop's amazing, but you know what? You can't be everywhere. And how am I going to get these people to kind of embed what they learn along the way? So everything I've kind of developed has come as a result of listening to clients. And the 5 levels of listening came about through starting off listening to 150 people in a research group, and then to 2,000 people in a research study, and now to 35,000 people who've completed the listening assessment. And one of the things when we go through the 5 levels of listening to know is each level requires some level of mastery before you can progress to the next level. Think of somebody who goes into a karate studio or a judo dojo and tries to do a flying back kick straight away. They're going to injure themselves. So when we talk about those higher levels of listening, make sure you've mastered each of the levels. So the levels are: level 1, listening to yourself. Level 2, listening to the content. Now, we stop here at level 1 and 2 because 92% of people, based on our research, are actually at these 2 levels, listening to things. As we move up to level 3, 4, and 5, we're listening for things. We're listening for context. That's level 3. At level 4, we're listening for what's unsaid. And then at level 5, we're listening for what it means for them. So the easy way to remember it, yourself, content, context, unsaid, and meaning. They're the 5 levels of listening. And I'll pause. How would you like to deconstruct them?
Yeah. So I love how you separated them out as listening to and listening for, and how interesting it is to me that it's hard for people to get past just the listening to in order to get to the listening for, those last 3. Tell me more about what does it take to master the listening to, the first 2, in order for people to successfully move into those higher level listening for?
Yeah, so the good news and the bad news is the first person everybody ignores when they start listening. It's not your job to listen to the speaker. It's actually your job to listen to yourself. Now, what does that mean, Oscar? Well, with all that going on in our mind, as we approach a conversation, are we even available to listen? When you listen to yourself and somebody approaches you in a corridor at work or WhatsApps you or sends you a message, if you're listening to yourself, mastery sounds like, Mira, thanks for that question. Look, now's not a really good time. I know it's important for you, and I can give you my full and undivided attention in an hour tomorrow when you're ready. But if you're not listening to yourself, you're not even capable of making that informed choice, not just for them, and it's also for you. But if you just default and go, okay, well, I'll just listen to what they've got to say, yet you're still processing something else that's got to do with your last meeting, the next conversation, whatever it is, you're doing a disservice to them because your brain is somewhere else. Your mind is somewhere else. So at level 1, it's just being conscious enough to listen to yourself. 3 practical tips at level 1 to help you notice. Number 1, are you noticing your breath? Now, I'm not saying, are you breathing? I'm saying, are you noticing your breath? If you're conscious and present, you will notice your breath. Is it short? Is it shallow? Is it deep and full? Are you noticing your breath? So tip number 1 at level 1 is notice your breathing. Tip number 2 is drink water. Coffee does not count. Although it's a brown or black liquid, it doesn't count. Just drink water, and what you'll notice if you're listening to your body is you'll feel the water in your system. But it sends a signal to this part of the body here around the lungs and the heart called the parasympathetic nervous system that says everything's okay. You'll actually, if you drink water and notice this, as well as your breathing, your heart rate will move down. And with your heart rate slightly lower, you'll be able to become present to yourself. And then finally, the point I made earlier, make an informed decision. Even though a meeting is in the calendar, even though somebody's approached you, ask yourself this question: is now the right time for this meeting? If the answer to that is yes, ask the second question: is this the right place for this meeting, for listening to be present? Because sometimes you may have a meeting that's Zoom or a Teams meeting or a Google Meets meeting or a WhatsApp video, doesn't matter. It may be a more productive meeting if you just make it a phone call where you're both walking and have physical activity given the purpose of the conversation. So that's level 1. Any of those tips useful for you, Mira?
Yeah, and I want to add a little something to this because of the fact that I work with a lot of women in leadership that are slowly starting to unlearn negative messages that they received throughout their entire lives about being present for other people, unconditionally, unquestioningly being present and serving others. This at this level, that alone might take some work and practice just to set boundaries, just to realize you have boundaries you can set. You can choose to ask, not now. And all of that is okay. And some of it is taking the time to practice boundary setting, letting go of people pleasing, all the things that could get in the way of being okay with rescheduling something and not feeling like you have to be present for all people at all times.
And a ninja move at this level often, and this is one I use regularly, this level, great question. I'd love to help, but I know there's someone much better qualified than me to assist with what you've described. Is it okay if I make an introduction? Right?
Yeah.
So it's not just the delay. It's like there's probably, depending on what somebody's described, in 1 in 3 discussions, you're probably not even the person they should be having the conversation with. And a really good example is if you're a leader in the workplace and somebody wants to have a conversation because they want to give feedback about the last meeting they were in with someone in your team, the first question you should ask them is simply this: have you provided them with the feedback? And all of a sudden, the dynamic of the conversation will be different. One thing I do want to mention with these tips, knowing the boundaries of the model I'm working with and where this doesn't work. Where this doesn't work is implied in the model is that there is some kind of equity in the power between the participants in a dialogue. If there is a significant power differential in the conversation, a really, really senior person, a really, really toxic person, you pick your poison. Most of these tips are unlikely to be productive for you. So I just want to
That's a
make
great
sure
point. Yeah.
everybody
Yeah.
understands that, because well-meaning advice in the wrong context is worse than no advice at all.
Absolutely. Yes. A great point. Yeah. So it looks like we're getting close to the ad break, and I don't want to cut us off by starting level 2 ideas, tips, tricks. So I'm going to keep people on the edge of their seat, go into the ad break. And then when we come back, we're going to get into that level 2, some tips and tricks around listening into to the content. We'll be right back in just a moment with the hard skills.
Were you an essential worker during the pandemic? If you needed to learn stages of epilepsy, did you depend on advocates? Did you use new innovations to cope with mental and neurological issues? Maintaining high quality of life and keeping good mental health are what we all strive for. I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each week top healthcare influencers, professionals, and innovators answer these questions and more. Stay tuned on Thursdays at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will continue to be frank about health with all of you.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest today, Oscar Trimboli of How to Listen. We started discussing the 5 levels of listening. He gave us a good overview and some really great tips, especially at the first level, listening to self. And so we don't have that much time to cover all. And I'm wondering if it makes more sense to cover level 2, which is like seems like the tipping point of like what you need in order to get into the higher level, more difficult ones, or if we want to sort of give, broader tips across. It's up to you, Oscar. What would be most helpful? What do you think is most helpful for most people to hear?
For most people, 63% of people are stuck at level 1, and then we get to 93% level 1 and level 2. So I think we'll cover off the majority. So level 2, listening to the content. It's what you hear, what you see, and what you sense. And some people are primary visual listeners first and then auditory, and some are auditory, then visual. So the easy way to think about this is, do you prefer to listen with your eyes closed or a podcast, or do you prefer to watch on YouTube? That'll give you a little hint straight away to make yourself conscious of your primary listening orientation. It's either primary visual or primary auditory. And if you're in a team meeting at work, if you feel safe, close your eyes for 2 minutes and go, oh, that was really easy, or that's really hard. It's really easy, you're primary auditory. So you want to hear first, see second, sense third. And the opposite is true there. So the hearing is, just make sure that your body's in a position that there's no barriers, whether that's online or offline, and think about the position in which you sit, because sometimes just sitting with someone face to face may be better done walking, or maybe somebody that you're always doing a video conference with, maybe do an audio call only and switch off the camera depending on their preference and yours. So at level 2, hearing is hearing the words. We make sense of it as we move up to level 3 and 4 and 5. The second one, see, and Mira did a beautiful job in her story about somebody who got a different job. The body language was giving a completely incongruent signal to what the words were saying. Your job is not to judge that, as Mira did. It's just to hold up a mirror, and they'll fill in the gaps for you. There's a lot of folk science around body language, and be careful. We interviewed Susan Constantine, the human lie detector. She's a jury consultant, and she said, be careful. Someone might have their arms folded because they're cold and sitting under the air conditioning duct. The final one is sense. Sense is emotion. Some people say, oh, I don't really like emotion at work. Sorry, we're dealing with humans, and they have positive and other emotions, and it's your job to tune into that. Now, remember, if we're not available at level 1, we can't even tune into that. So your ability to sense, where is that sound coming from in their body? Is it coming from somewhere down deep in their diaphragm, or is it coming up here from the top of the throat? It's all going to be signal for emotion. Are their shoulders back? Is their head tilted? All these things are tips for you to keep in mind when it comes to listening at level 2. See, hear, and sense.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a few situations. I'm curious your thoughts on this. First, when we went to the virtual environment predominantly for some jobs, and many of them, on the one hand, it's easier to remain connected as a team if all cameras are on. On the other hand, there are people that hear better with the camera off when there's not as many things happening and things distracting you in front of your face, right? And then there's people with a variety of neurodiverse ways of interacting, right? Where they might have different facial expressions, or you know,
blank facial expressions.
blank
yeah.
facial expressions, interactions. I'm curious if that's come up in your work and how you might sort of like adjust or recommend navigating around that.
Yeah. And we've written a 110-page guide for how to listen virtually as a host. So we do unpack this in a lot of detail. If you want additional resources
Great.
after that, you'll be able to find it. Number one, your job as the host is not to mandate cameras on or off. If you're in a workplace with adults, then let them choose and give them a reason to have cameras on. So a very simple example of this was I was working with an organization where the values of the organization included authenticity and transparency. I thought that was great. How did I know their values? About half of the people had these virtual backgrounds with the values listed on them. And some people didn't. They had their bedroom in the middle of the pandemic or wherever they were coming in from. So I made a simple reflection to the group to go, isn't it interesting that we connect differently, and the group did completely differently? Somebody noticed a painting in the background of somebody's home and commented on that, and it started a whole conversation. And there was a connection there. And I was working with this group over a monthly series for 6 months. Each month, fewer and fewer people had their corporate background up, and more people were comfortable showing what was in their background because it created a completely different connection. Now, mirrors probably played the game called Spot How Many Yodas Are in Oscar's Background, right? And these are all gifts from clients, because for those of you who can't see me, I've got a Yoda hairstyle, and some people say I talk like Yoda. But yeah, clients send me those as gifts. So in the background, the reason I'm putting Yodas in there is I can talk to the different Yoda and the different client experience and all of that. And there's things from John Deere tractor in there, and there's things from Salesforce in there. There's a whole story, but also is my family there in various photos. And there's a photo of me on a mountain, and there's a whole story behind that. Be deliberate in your choice as a host about cameras on or cameras off. One tip we talk about in the guide that people go, wow, Oscar, that's the only tip I needed. The tip is hide self-view. So you still can have your camera on, but you don't have to see yourself. And in the research done at Stanford, where they, during the pandemic, they collected over 30,000 respondents to this survey, women judged their appearance much more harshly than men, and it was exacerbated by self-view in Zoom or Teams or whatever the software you use. So as a host, give people a choice to put their cameras on, and then give them a reason. Comment on something where the people do have their cameras on. Wow, Mira, I just noticed your face lit up when we mentioned this. You're signaling to everybody that you're actually watching what's going on, not just listening with your ears.
Beautiful. Lots of tips. Also, I didn't see the Yodas in your background. What I was marveling at actually before was all of the calming, warm lights.
Okay.
That's what I noticed. And I thought, oh, he must be like one of those folks that are just like wanting to create a calming presence and a relaxing aura around him. Now,
Yeah.
we
There's
are
design and it's deliberate. That's what
Yeah.
the takeaway is. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. We are reaching the closing end here, and I want to make sure that we don't overlook how people can find you and where they can learn more about your work. So for those of you who are watching, I have 2 websites up. Oscar, would you like to share a little bit more about these 2 websites?
Yeah, you can find out about your own listening. Visit listeningquiz.com, and you can take a 7-minute assessment, get a tailored report that tells you primary and secondary listening barrier, and then we give you tips about what to do about it. So that's listeningquiz.com. And for those of you who are curious about the book, it's available wherever you can get books. And I'm biased, but the audiobook version is amazing. You can get the book How to Listen.
Is it you?
No, we've got a series of actors, voice actors that were part of it. It's a very different audiobook experience. Everybody who listens to I get more comments back from readers who listen via audio. It's like, oh, wow, I thought I could just press play and it would put me to sleep, but you've got all these techniques that I use in there to keep people's attention because, yeah, I
Super
know how
interesting.
people listen. Yeah.
Now you got my attention. Okay, so audience, what did you take away? What is one small change that you can implement this week based on what you learned from Oscar? Or some of it is just like, get the book and figure it out, right? Share it with us on LinkedIn and at talkradio.nyc so we can cheer you on. Talk Radio is also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, Apple, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, all over the place. If today's episode resonated with you, share it with a colleague, leave a review. And if you're looking for more personalized support or leadership or team coaching, you could head to gotowerscope.com and schedule a consultation. If you're looking for more support with listening in particular, Oscar has described all kinds of ways he can help you and your organization. And thank you to Talk Radio NYC for hosting. Together, we'll navigate the complexities of leadership and emerge stronger on the other side. Thank you for joining me, Oscar Trimboli, today on this journey. Really appreciate you.
Thanks for listening.
Absolutely. And so this is Dr. Mira Branco signing off. Until next time, stay steady, stay present, and keep building those hard skills. Take care, everybody.